Hey guys, and welcome to this video where we'll be talking about strategies. We've decided to make the trading framework that we use in our own trading freely available. The framework is still under heavy development, but we've decided to slowly start publishing it bit by bit. Now, trading is not always the idealized concept of creating a functional and automated trading strategy that you deploy where you make profits and you never have to touch it again. Oftentimes, it's a major help just to have some automations that facilitate your manual trading. This framework aims to simplify the process drastically by doing most of the heavy lifting. In this video, we'll go through what we could do with this framework, the basic concepts, and finally setting up the framework on your local machine. So let's get started. The framework is built in TypeScript and it's run with Node.js. But to work with the framework, only basic knowledge of JavaScript is required. You can read about the decision-making process in this introduction. Let's move on to learning about the basics. So the whole framework is based on what is called finite state machines, or FSM. And this implements the popular state design pattern. Now, this might seem or sound a bit geeky, but in a nutshell, all it is a bunch of states with some transitions in between them that define the logic of a trading strategy. So in this basic example, we've created an EMA crossover strategy that simply, when it starts out, it's gonna look for an EMA 9 crossover up and above the EMA 20. And in that case, it's going to take a long position. Vice versa, if the EMA 9 crosses down and below the EMA 20, it's going to enter a short position. If we're in a long position already, it is also going to monitor whether or not we're getting an EMA 9 going under the EMA 20. And in that case, it's going to close down the long position and it's going to open up a short position, and vice versa the other way. This might not be the ideal strategy, but it showcases what most strategies will do. The engine is based on a timer that is going to kick in, and this is based on a cron job. In this example, we are executing the bot at every 1 second past every 5 minutes. And essentially what it does is that it's going to loop through all the trades that we have entered into the system and which lives here in the database. And as stated up here, we're going to have many states that each have their own implementation. So at each what's called a tick, it's going to execute the code in that particular state. And there's a lot of functionality provided by the framework in these superclasses. If you don't know what a cron job is, there's some links here to some documentation. Now, everything is very configurable and customizable, and we've tried our best to put in comments where things are not very clear, but the structure and naming conventions should be fairly easy to understand. So here we got the bot configuration. It's got an ID. We got the finite state machine. We enabled that, yes, and there's a trade delay which is used to respect the rate limits when the framework is talking to the TAPI API to get technical analysis and these kind of things. The tick schedule is defined here, and there's a scanner configuration, which we will get to now. Live trading is disabled for now, but we'll get to that. We've tried to explain all the mechanisms, but for the purpose of keeping this video fairly short, we'll let you go ahead and read these things yourself. It's essentially explaining in more detail what I have just said. So in many cases, what we want to do in our trading sessions is find good setups that we can trade. So imagine an exchange. It has a lot of symbols, and we want to know which coins or which trading pairs have a good setup at this particular point in time. So a scanner is highly useful for this. It has its own timer, and this one is set to execute every hour. It's going to execute a scan, and that scan is based on some technical analysis that you define yourself, and it gets that through the TAPI API. Live trading and simulation, we'll get back to that later. But for now, let's get started with setting up our localhost environment and get started. We're working on on another guide, which is a manual setup where you can download the packages directly from the npm TAPI strategies package. But let's go ahead and continue to the Docker full setup. Now, for those of you who don't know what Docker is a platform that allows you to package, distribute, and run applications in isolated containers, making it easy to deploy and manage software across different environments. And Docker Compose is a tool for defining and running multi-container Docker applications using a simple configuration file. So you are going to have these things installed on your system. First one is Git, second Docker, and Docker Compose. Everything is cross-platform, so it'll run on Linux, Mac, and even Windows. It's a good idea to also install Node.js. All right, getting started. So we already have our directory where we will be installing the system into. So what we have to do is we're going to have to clone the public GitHub repository located here at github.com /TAPI/strategies. So let's go ahead and do that. Copy this over. And now we have a copy of the full repository. Let's cd into that. See what we have. All right. Now you can change the remote and push that up to your own private repository if you would like to. Let's keep following the guide. Let's cd into the strategy directory, and let's install the dependencies. For this, you're going to have the Node.js installed on your system. Let's boot up our code editor. Actually, let's get into the correct directory. All right, let's see what we got. So you can see we have a complete clone of what is in the GitHub repository. And let's continue over to the guide. So yeah, in order to keep the video short, we're not gonna explain the entire file system here, but please have a look yourself into the files and directory structure, and you can read about what all the different files and directory, what they do and how it's set up and why it is that. Now there's only two files that are not included during the clone, and these are configuration files. And these configuration files, they hold sensitive information like secrets, your TAPI secret, API keys to the exchange, database connections, and all these things. So you never want to put those up and host them in a with a public hosting provider, even though it's a private repository. But we have a template where you can simply copy paste this in. So let's go ahead and copy paste that in. This configuration files goes in the strategy folder, config.yml. Let's put that in. Let's give it a save. And please don't forget to paste in your TAPI secret here. The other file that is not included is the .env file, which tells Docker Compose how to configure and how to boot up the system. And this one belongs in the root directory. Let's paste that in. This tells Docker Compose to boot up the system and expose it to port 3002, running in dev mode, running the Phobos bot. By the way, the naming convention, Phobos is one of the moons of Mars. So that is how we are naming all the strategies according to the names of the moons of our solar system. There's a couple of other strategies. Deimos is the other moon of Mars. And here's a couple of short lists. We'll get back to that in a later video, but since these can be reused by different bots, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to give them that type of name, but rather a reusable name that makes sense across multiple strategies. All right. So how this works is that Docker is doing a lot of magic under the hood. It's gonna gather up all the files, it's gonna put them in the right place, and it's gonna boot up first a database instance of Mongo. By the way, Mongo is our choice because it's an easy no schema, document-oriented database that directly takes JavaScript objects. So it's a very easy database to work with in this scenario. So what this all means is that we only have to run one command, which is the docker compose up, and that is going to boot up the entire framework so that we can start working with it. We have to be in the correct directory though, where the docker compose YML file is located. So docker compose up, and if everything is working, we should see an output similar to this. So what's happening here is that it's going to do a lot of merging of the configuration files, set everything up. It's going to connect to the Mongo database, which you can see if we get a list of containers running. You can see that we have a Mongo instance running on this port, standard Mongo port. and it's going to connect to that, automatically create a database. It's going to create a lot of indexes so that querying is more efficient. And it's going to analyze the system to check if everything is set up correctly. And it will display a message if the system is running that it's available on a particular port in development mode or production mode. So the main entry point is here. Oh, you can see here the timer is kicking in for the FSM, and it's looking for trades at every 1 second past every 5 minutes, and it found 0 trades, and that's because we have not entered any trades into the system yet. We'll get back to that in a future video, probably the next one. What was I getting at? The main entry point for the system is this index.js file. It will require the entire framework. It's going to boot up a new instance of the framework, and it's going to start up the application. The first thing is that it's going to start up the bot. That includes the FSM and the scanners, and it's going to boot up a REST API so that we can talk to the bot. And we'll get back to this one also in a later video, as well as this one. Actually, this one might be deprecated, but yeah, let's see. If all is well, we should be able to talk to the bot. We'll give it a ping. Yeah, seems to work. All right. Last but not least, let's see if we have anything in the database. You can see it created a database with the name of our strategy, prefixed with what is in the configuration file for the database. And for every strategy, there's going to be a number of collections or tables, if you will, if you're talking about relational databases, not document-oriented databases. It will hold things like orders when we get to live trading. It will hold trade information, state information about the particular trades. Whenever they're fulfilled, executed, they will be placed in the historical collection, and there will be some trade logging. All right. That is it. Well, there is so the whole system is set up, and when it's running in Docker, it is running in what's in Node.js terms called well, it's a package called NodeMon, and essentially what it does is it's monitoring file changes. So whenever you do a file change, say in one of the state implementations, and you save that, it's going to automatically reboot the system so that you don't have to reload manually the system. The only thing that is not auto-reloaded are the configuration files, this one and the .env. So if you want to change and work on a different strategy, you change this one over to, say, Deimos, you're going to have to save that, shut it down, Control-C, and boot it back up. And that is it for the installation. In the next chapter, we'll have a look at the development and play with the EMA strategy, execute some ticks. And after that, we will get to creating shortlist, working with the scanner. So see you all on the next one.